هذه اللحظة تضامن وغضب من هذا الشارع.
Coming up on this Jerusalem Dateline, picking up the pieces in the aftermath of devastation, weeping with those who weep and standing with the survivors. Plus, President Herzog urges moderation and restraint as voices on both sides of Israel's judicial reform debate get louder. And Israeli innovation on display in this year's Awokraude Summit, fulfilling the promise given to Abraham that his descendants would be a blessing to the world. All this and more on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, reporting on the ground from Adana, Turkey. Days after the massive earthquakes to Turkey and Syria, search and rescue operations are nearly over and the time of recovery has begun. In Turkey, the attention now turns to humanitarian aid. Most international search and rescue teams have left the country, leaving behind a record of amazing rescues, such as Israel's United Hatzalah team, which pulled 15 people out of the rubble. Still, the growing death toll and collapsed buildings serve as a sobering reminder of the tragedy. The earthquake zone stretches for nearly 300 miles, indicating how massive the rebuilding program will encompass, which includes the lives of millions of earthquake victims. That's why Operation Blessing is on the ground. One of the immediate needs of the people affected by the earthquake is hot food, like distributed by this Operation Blessing team in this neighborhood in Hatay.
God gave this opportunity to Operation Blessing to bless them, to love them, to listen to them, cry with them, and pray with them.
Siz geldiniz.
You came. You found us. We thank all of you. God bless you. You gave us food. We are waiting for all of your support and help.
The help includes clothes taken to these people living in tents as nighttime temperatures reach below freezing, and also the distribution of these food boxes.
Thank you very much, Operation Blessing. You are welcome. We feel appreciated. We want you to continue helping.
For the adults, the earthquake is clearly life-changing. For children, many are afraid to go back into their homes, even if they're still standing.
You can see in their faces, even when they kind of sit and think, there's fear.
That's why OB volunteer Karen Cochran stepped in.
So I just ran in and I just kind of organized some games, and we were playing Duck, Duck, Goose, and we were playing tag and singing and dancing and running around. I was talking to a child trauma expert, and they said that bringing joyful memories in the midst of painful circumstances is really important. So I was just saying, I want to bring as many joyful memories in this time to just bring, just a shift in what they remember and are thinking.
For Karen, Amir, and the entire team, it's about sharing God's love.
We came to just say, you are our family, you are our friend, you are our sister, you are our brother, your children, they are we love them and we want to hear from you. We want to be with you in this time. And they are really very thankful to God. Even they are thanking us, but we know it's because of Jesus.
I just feel so blessed to be here right now amongst these families, amongst these children, and to just be serving and doing anything I can, and just feel so blessed to even build relationships and friendships with these children and with these families. And I would say already there I've made friends. I have friends here right now of children and families, and yeah, and Hattai and Adana, there's friends, and that's such a gift.
Israelis demonstrated outside the Knesset after Israel's president pleaded with his countrymen not to let the issue of judicial reform destroy the country. As Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, it's a battle not likely to go away.
Dispersing lights, we need your help. Help us save our democracy.
Demonstrators called for help outside the U.S. Embassy as tens of thousands from around the country gathered outside Israel's Knesset.
We came to demonstrate against the very aggressive legislation which gonna turn Israel from a liberal democracy into a fascist dictatorship.
Inside the Knesset, lawmakers introduced legislation to change the judicial system, which includes limiting Supreme Court power to overrule legislation and giving lawmakers more power over appointing judges.
I feel, we all feel that we're in a moment before a collision, even a violent collision, a barrel of explosives before a blast.
The divisive issue prompted Israeli President Isaac Herzog to address the nation.
The judiciary must be a home for the diversity of opinions in Israeli society. The fact that there is not enough diversity, for example, there are no judges of Eastern origin in the Supreme Court, bothers me a lot.
Herzog says the call for reforms is a product of imbalance between authorities and crossing boundaries that culminated in the 2005 Israeli pullout from the Gaza Strip and northern Samaria, known as the disengagement.
This pain of brothers and sisters is real. To reject it and ignore it is a big mistake.
Many opponents believe Prime Minister Netanyahu could use the changes to stop the trial against him. Others fear it might lead to religious law being imposed here.
The reason that there's mistrust here is because the Minister of Justice himself said that this reform was a 4-story building reform. And what we're seeing now is only the first floor. For the people of Israel, the population here, there's lack of transparency as to what the government is planning.
Advocate Yehuda Schaefer argues the Israeli political system has no checks and balances except elections and the Supreme Court.
We don't have a constitution. We don't have 2 houses of parliament. All the basic rights in Israel, like freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and many others, are written nowhere and have been created by the court in common law.
Simcha Rotman, who heads the Knesset's Constitution, Law, and Justice Committee, however, claims the Supreme Court has overstepped its boundaries.
And the court is biased. The court is canceling legislation by the Knesset for political reasons and does not defend human rights. For all those reasons, we need to reform the courts.
Rotman sees the changes as positive for all of Israel, from the economy to the fight against terrorism.
People will elect their representative, and their representative will push forward the policies that they are elected to do. A lot of changes, but the main issue is Israel will be a democratic, self-governed country.
Herzog says he met with many on both sides of the issue.
I state with certainty, it is possible to reach a broad consensus, which will put the citizens of Israel above all debate. Yes, it is possible.
While he's calling on the government to stop the legislation, Netanyahu's coalition has moved ahead while saying they are still open to dialogue with the left. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, this year's Awokrowd Summit, showcasing Israeli innovation and creativity at its best.
We're talking about how to fight greenhouse gases, how to clean the world's water supply, how to reforest the trees.
International investors gathered in Jerusalem looking for products to back that would make life on earth better and also turn a profit. Paul Strand has the story.
What this biggest summit in Israel is all about is dreamers, idea people, innovators, entrepreneurs who come up with ideas for stuff, getting together with the money people who can give them the cash to make that stuff into real products and maybe improve the world at the same time.
John Medved, head of our crowd, a backer of startup companies, sees improving the world as a mandate for the Jewish people.
God created the world in 6 days, except that he left it for man to perfect. Okay, in other words, it's up to us to join the Almighty and to make things right. And that's sort of like the real agenda item here. That's what we're all talking about. And I hope that together we're going to make some progress.
In one of the first eye-catching exhibits after the welcome sculpture sat a personal electric-powered plane that could eventually cut down on gas guzzlers and jammed highways.
It's very difficult to own a private aircraft or a helicopter. And we're trying to remove most of the obstacles that prevent people from owning private aircraft. And being vertical and being electrical and therefore quiet is just part of it.
A few feet away, UBQ Materials showcased a way to take waste produced at home and turn it into a replacement for an environmental threat choking dumps and landfills.
So we turn household waste into a sustainable substitute to plastic.
We also saw H2 Pro promoting its cleaner, greener way involving hydrogen to reduce the much talked about carbon footprint.
The hydrogen industry and the hydrogen emissions, CO2 emissions, are 12 to 15% of the global carbon dioxide emissions. So making that green will contribute immensely to decarbonizing the world.
This quadriplegic gentleman from Up and Ride Robotics buzzed around the summit in a device designed to change the lives of people who can't walk by getting them up on their feet.
It's the dignity of the person. Being little in a wheelchair, sitting like this, no one really counts you.
Debate over the present government under Benjamin Netanyahu has led to a move encouraging investors to keep their money out of Israel as long as he's in charge. Medved says most investors concentrate on bigger issues than Israeli politics.
Creativity and the kind of drive that creates startups flourishes in democratic environments. And I think Israel's democracy is healthy. I think there's some, wild people who say things. People are upset and passionate. And I'm not going to hold it against them. We're getting beyond that here at this conference. We're talking about how to fight greenhouse gases, how to clean the world's water supply, how to reforest the trees. I mean, the reality is, and your audience certainly understands this, humanity has to be a partner with God in creation.
One new development here is how the Abraham Accords have paved the way for groups of Arabs and Muslims to visit due to better relations between Israel and countries like Morocco and the United Arab Emirates. Investors worldwide flock here because of a continued economic growth, while places like America and Europe are stagnant or slipping into recession. Medved sees Israel's continuing financial prosperity as part of its reward for trying to do right spiritually.
If Israel wasn't the startup nation, so what are we going to be? Okay, I'm sorry, this is our destiny. Our destiny is to create. Our destiny is to, fix the world. And we're just a little people, we make a lot of noise. But I think that most Israelis, whether they wear a yarmulke or they don't wear a yarmulke, view this as a spiritual undertaking, that we're doing this not just to make money, but to do good. And we believe very firmly at our crowd in the double bottom line, where you can do good and make money at the same time.
So look at this place, some 6,000 people, hundreds of innovators and entrepreneurs and startups coming together with thousands of investors for a common purpose, to do good and to do some business. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Our Crowd Global Summit, Jerusalem.
Up next, see why space is the next frontier for war and why the U.S. can't afford to be asleep at the switch. Iran's president made a rare visit to Beijing, the latest sign of deepening ties between the two nations. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi received a warm welcome from President Xi in a state visit that included talks on trade, agriculture, industry, and more. They agreed to build on a 25-year program signed in 2021 to collaborate on oil production, military, and security. The visit was widely seen as a message to the West, which has imposed trade and financial sanctions on Iran in response to Tehran's efforts to develop nuclear weapons. Referring to Western pressure, Xi said Beijing, quote, opposes external forces interfering in Iran's internal affairs, and promised to work with Iran on issues involving each other's core interests. Speaking of core interests, military experts say the U.S. cannot afford to lose the international race to dominate space. Enemies of the U.S. are already eyeing America's most valuable assets, satellites. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports.
U.S. military and commercial satellites are critical for communication, surveillance, and navigation. And to our adversaries in the space race, they're attractive strategic targets.
Just a couple of months ago, the Russians fired a missile. Now, they shot their own satellite, but they destroyed a satellite that was in orbit. And they did that to demonstrate both to the United States and our allies that they had the capability to take out satellites.
And Russia has threatened to do just that if the U.S. continues to provide critical support and certain weaponry to Ukraine.
So they have ways to do this. They have capabilities to do this. And so the very fact that they said they might consider it is problematic for the United States.
China is also a player, as part of its rapid military modernization effort focuses on space technology.
China has the means and has had the means for a long time to disable our satellites, either with direct ascent weapons that actually destroy them, with on-orbit capabilities that involved electronic warfare and directed energy.
While the threat environment has increased, experts like Mike Rogers, former chair of the House Intelligence Committee, say the U.S. has known about this problem for a long time and is taking action.
One of the reasons the Space Force was created is because to focus on this notion that we are vulnerable in space, the United States is. And so that was a good start.
U.S. defense officials have also recently put Russia and China on notice, announcing that attacks on satellites could warrant a military response.
To defend our country and prevent conflict, we will rely on integrated deterrence. To make it clear to any potential adversary that the risk and the cost of aggression far outweigh any conceivable gains.
The U.S. and Japan recently announced a new space collaboration focused on research, exploration, and mutual defense. A new phase in that alliance that sends a strong message. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Coming up, walking on the very stones Jesus could have walked on 2,000 years ago, as he joined everyone else going in and out of Jerusalem's Second Temple.
So everything you're seeing on this tour is original. And saying that, we understand that we're not speaking about history, we're walking through history.
"2,000 years ago, the Western Wall tunnels were streets and living spaces in Second Temple times. As Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl tells us, a new public section is shedding light on Jewish life in Jerusalem during the time of Jesus.
The Western Wall originally served as a support for the Second Biblical Temple. For years, visitors could walk the length of the wall underground. Now, the Great Bridge Tour of the Western Wall tunnels takes visitors even deeper into history.
Basically, we're digging the roots of Jerusalem that connect to everyone. Every room is connected to a different story, to a different paragraph that we find in the text.
The Western Wall Heritage Foundation sees the Great Bridge story as a symbol for the glory and destruction of all Jerusalem. Tour guide Ishai Solomon describes the excavations as putting together a puzzle.
We have the frame and we have other archaeological digs. Opening up this place helps us to connect to the most holy site, and that's the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. Hopefully also connecting the people that come and visit this place to the big idea behind it.
The new route begins here with a historical overview.
And we're starting with the main mountain in Jerusalem. It's called the Temple Mount and Mount Moriah, the temple that was built later on by Solomon and Herod. One of the key stories in the Bible, the binding of Isaac, happens over here. It happened 3,800 years ago.
Beneath people praying at the Western Wall, visitors enter rooms less than 100 feet from the Temple Mount.
These arches are between 6 to 7 meters width, and that's the first bridge that stood here from the days of the Hasmoneans. This takes us back 2,150 years. They built the original bridge, and above it there's ancient cement that held up the aqueduct that brought the water to the Temple Mount.
From sacrifices to cleansing needed to enter the Temple Mount, water was vital to worship. Standing in a mikveh, a ritual bath, Solomon said when archaeologists first came to the Holy Land in the 1800s, they discovered something they couldn't explain.
This isn't a cistern filled up with water for drinking. This isn't a bathhouse, because we know how a bathhouse looks like. So they write, we found a room with steps going in and plaster on the wall.
Since then, they've discovered 300 ritual baths in Jerusalem and 900 around Israel from the Second Temple times, 4 of them in the Western Wall tunnels that would have been used by worshippers to cleanse themselves before ascending the mount.
So everything you're seeing on this tour is original. And saying that, we understand that we're not speaking about history, we're walking through history.
A model with moving parts shows how Jerusalem would have looked throughout the ages. Plus, visitors get a unique view of the wall's largest stone, weighing hundreds of tons. Lower still is the ancient business level.
We found shops like this in the beginning of the Western Wall. And on your left, you can see remainings of the destruction of the Western Wall. These stones that are lying over here on the left were covering the whole excavation, and these were thrown down by the Romans, 70 CE.
The people of that day had no idea it would take 2,000 years to come back home.
They thought that as the first temple was destroyed and the second temple was built 70 years later, same thing will happen over here.
Archaeologists have been able to excavate here since the 1967 Six-Day War put the holy site back into Israeli hands. Before then, only a small alley existed next to the wall in which to pray. Afterward, they built the large plaza.
The plaza was created, but no one really checked what's beneath it and rebuilt the floors.
Western Wall Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich says the digging uncovers the Jewish heritage.
Our roots are here in every corner. We're working very hard to excavate, to find them and show them to the next generation. And every time we're getting to know a new world of history.
Speaking to journalists, Rabinovich made clear Jews would follow the rules about no excavation under the Temple Mount itself, an explosive issue in the Islamic world.
We're not digging underneath the Temple Mount, not because of political issues, but because it's forbidden by Jewish law.
Rabinovich says, unlike the Temple Mount, the Western Wall and tunnels are available to everyone.
In 1967, when we came back, we opened the place to all religions, to everyone. We don't check or we don't do a background check. If a person is Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, everyone can come here and pray.
The ultimate goal is to excavate the entire area and put the plaza on pillars, so in 5 to 10 years, visitors can get an even clearer picture of life during temple times. Julie Stahl, CBN News, the Western Wall Tunnels, Jerusalem.
We've been reporting about a week now on the ground here in Turkey. Please continue to pray for the people of Turkey who have gone through such a traumatic experience, and consider donating to Operation Blessing that is doing an amazing job on the ground here helping people recover. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN and CBN News apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.